Chapter 28 The 80s. Soon it would be Christmas, and this time we would bring Tom to visit. Baltasar took care of his papers and shipped him to the Caribbean, as he used to say when he referred to the place where he lived, giving himself importance. 10 long years had passed, and I had not seen him again. With the children's help, we set up the little guest house in the garden, where Grandpa would have his room, bathroom, and kitchen. I thought he would feel comfortable, since we would be together but not mixed up, as he used to say. On the other hand, Rosalinda had been living with us for months due to the loss of her house. The long-awaited day has finally arrived. Before going to work, I take a last look at the little house where Tom will live. Everything looks perfect. The queen-size bed with sky blue sheets, his favorite color. The air conditioner cools to the max so he doesn't drown in the humidity. Soft towels for the bathroom. The fridge with soft drinks and treats the kids brought him. Coffee to brew in the morning. Cups, glasses, and cutlery. Nothing is missing. I didn't even forget the bathing suit and sandals for when he walks to the beach, where I'm sure he will enjoy to the fullest. We are all in an uproar with the arrival of this guest. Rosalinda comments, "I don't know why so much fuss. Why are you bringing him? It will be a complication." Children interrupt. No, grandmother, he will be fine. You don't have to see him if you don't want to. He will be in his own home and we will take care of him. Although they did not know him personally, they defended him to death because of her appreciation that I had instilled in them for their grandfather. Sometimes I would read them the letters he sent me or tell them the stories my father told me when I was their age. It's time to go to the airport. 8 o'clock at night. Avianca announces the arrival of the flight from Chile. Passengers begin to leave and we are impatient to see him appear behind the glass door, which opens automatically every 2 minutes. The baggage handlers enter. The passengers exit, and Tom is nowhere to be seen. There is no one left. I ask the guard if he can find out about Tom Valdez. Then a customs officer approaches me and says, "Mr. Valdez is in the emergency room with the doctor because his blood pressure has risen severely. At this moment, he is leaving by ambulance directly to Ashford Medical Center." Shocked by the news, we took the car and drove straight to the hospital. We arrived at the emergency room, and after a while in the waiting room, they announced that he had been stabilized and that we would take him the next day. After an excruciating night, in the wee hours of the morning, we finally arrived. Nerves and emotion betrayed him, but he would recover within hours. "I'm fine now," he says in the afternoon when we visit him in his room. "With the love and care of my children, I feel like a champion again." Rosalinda sent him messages through the grandchildren, not of welcome, but of grumbling. The next day, at 8 o'clock in the morning, the sun was already hot. Tom got up in blue shorts, sandals, and a tropical shirt for breakfast. He brewed coffee and cooked a pan of ham and eggs. Matt was dazzled by Grandpa's recovery and ran to hug him. "I'm going to put on my shorts to swim with you." "Terrific," Grandfather replied. "Let's see which one of us is the winner." While I was on the way to work, they were on the way to the beach. Those were truly precious days, when every morning they would swim together out to sea. Tom was the shark and the children swam around him. In the afternoons, he would take a peaceful nap. He also made some friends with some Americans with whom he practiced the language while telling them anecdotes of his life in Chile. I tried to please him by buying his favorite toys, for example, a toolbox with pliers, wrenches, and screwdrivers. When I gave it to him, my father would hug me, thanking me for these little things. This I will use in my housework at the boarding house. This way I feel useful," he said, satisfied. As the days passed, Rosalinda's anger dissolved. As they were left alone for several hours, they had no choice but to make peace. In the afternoons, when I came home from work, I would catch them on the terrace chatting amicably about trivialities. They would talk about the differences between Chile and Puerto Rico, Tom would take the lead and my mother would listen attentively. What most caught my dad's attention was the coexistence of so many different races and social statuses. On one occasion, he confessed to me that he did not like the heterogeneity of the environment. I think that this mentality was due to the idiosyncrasy of his country, a remote place where the poor classes and native people were much more segregated. I would prepare a cup of tea and join them to enjoy that exceptional harmony. I would look at them with nostalgia and think, so much wasted love. I still wonder how they lived those 50 years between love and torment. What kind of pillars supported their fortress of sand? During his stay, we took him and Rosalinda to visit Old San Juan and El Morro, a place that impressed Tom. I knew you liked to come, I said. It is impressive. I would love to know its story. If you allow me, Dad, after you've told me so many stories, this time I'll do it myself. Of course, my child. I'm all ears. This place is called San Felipe del Morro and is more than 400 years old. It was built as a defense fortress for those who came to attack the Spanish colony from the sea. Later, the castillo was occupied by the Americans as a military base between World War I and World War II. And don't miss it, just this year, it was declared a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Can you imagine standing on a 4th century old construction? Add this novelty to your repertoire of stories. I'm already imagining 1,000 battles, he celebrated. We also visited Dorado Beach, the most prestigious resort owned by the Rockefeller family. We would spend Sundays there and enjoy brunch and then nap on the deck chairs under the tropical palms, listening to the steel band drumming. Upon returning home, my father would kiss my cheek and thank me. I'm dreaming, daughter. When I get back to my room and I'm alone, I'm going to think about these wonderful days I've spent here. So the 3 months went by and it was time for him to return to Chile. That day we prepared a different meal as a farewell. I still remember my husband's generous words when he told him, "Don't go, Tom. You have a home here. You can stay with us as long as you wish." "No, thank you," he replied. "You are very kind, Jim, but enough time has passed and my place is in Chile. I must go, although I may come back someday." In the early morning, Jim drove him to the airport. A few weeks later, I had the joy of receiving a letter. Rancagua, June 20th, 1983. Dear little daughter, it seems that you have definitely become my tears cloth, because every time I'm broken down, your loving and dear hand comes to pull me through. Yesterday was a celebration of Father's Day. The radios and television stations made all day long a remembrance of the children so that they would not forget their elders, and even if it was an affectionate hug given to them, it would be received with affection by the elders, who one day gave them well-being, joy, and everything that every father does for the benefit of his children reasonably. I thought my son would come to greet me and know about my health. I spent the whole day in bed, waiting for his arrival, which, of course, did not come. I don't like to mourn miseries, but I would have liked to receive a warm hug from him. But I have forgotten that he is no longer the same as before. Now he is the king of Siam, or perhaps the pharaoh of Egypt, which is not the same as being the child I cradled in my arms and who slept and played with me. Every day it seems that, as the tango says, the heights were bad for him. And as the poem by Zorrilla says, Diego Captain Don Diego must not be the loud Diego who went to the wars of Flanders as a humble soldier after promising to marry Doña Inés on his return. That was fine when he was simple soldier of fortune, but not now that he was returning home as a captain. Moving on to something more pleasant, something happened that I didn't expect, and everything goes on as usual. It still rains. I have my stove. I don't miss the hot tea with sopaipilla that Manuela makes. Also sometimes a shot of navegado with cloves and cinnamon in my mug. There is always the memory of you. Everything I taste, I would like to share with you, And as you say in your letter, if I want to come back, the doors are open. And if you come to Chile and invite me, I will come again. I know that the hours I spent with you were magnificent, joyful, and I did nothing to be ashamed of. As for my health, it's like an oak tree. When the weather is nice, I go for a walk. I go to read in front of the hospital, and I remember other times. Sometimes I see your mother leaving on her way home. Thanks for the $10. They fell like boulders in an apothecary's eye. See you next time. Your loving father, Tom. Chapter 29. Matt's first job. It was after 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and I had just come home from my office when my son Matt, only 13 years old, was waiting for me excitedly to tell me, "Congratulate me, Mom! I just got my first job!" I looked at him in disbelief. What? Today at school, a supervisor from the newspaper, El Nuevo Dia, went to recruit kids to distribute in the urbanization, and I was chosen! I start tomorrow! He was so excited that he stumbled over his words. I'm going to earn 20 bills a week. I will save them for my new skateboard. Oh, how nice, I say. And are you willing to get up at 5 in the morning every day, including Sundays? Sure, Mom, he replied, handing me a sheet of paper with a contract that I would have to sign to authorize him to do his job. I wrote my name next to his, knowing that I was also taking on that responsibility, as I could not allow my child to go out alone walking with a heavy weight at that hour. The next day, when we woke up, it was still late summer and the morning was bright. The El Nuevo Dia bus had already deposited a bundle of newspapers in our driveway. Matt put them in the back of the car and we set off on our way. We ran into some neighbors who were on their way to work and greeted us warmly, especially my son, encouraging him and his new job. My Matt was very smart. He had grown up from the age of 2 in Ocean Park and knew every block from Pelota Park to the beachfront like the back of his hand. The whole area he frequented daily with his neighborhood friends to run bikes and swim in the afternoons until the sun went down. As we approached the first delivery, he pulled out of his pockets a list of customers. Almost all of them were the parents of his friends, and he told me, "Stop at the yellow house." As soon as I slowed down, he jumped down like a flash and left the newspaper on the foot wiper by the front door. We continued to drive around until the end of our first day. When we got home, we had breakfast, showered, and went about our daily routines. Thankfully, we lived just a few blocks from the school, so it was very easy for me to drop them off and then continue on to my work, which was on the same block. On the following occasions, as we went along the delivery road, I noticed that there were some household items in good condition in the front yard of several houses. The owners were leaving them because they didn't need them and so that someone could take advantage of them. So it was that one morning my eagle eye fell on a beautiful carved mahogany armchair, circa 1900s and 1940. I went over to inspect it, and as Matt walked back to the car, I had opened the trunk and said to him, "Help me get in on the car. We'll take it home." The boy looked at me in surprise and added, "Are you kidding?" "No, take the legs. I'll take the backrest and let's get in quick so that one of your friends doesn't see you." Those were magic words. Within seconds, our acquisition was on its way home, and within a couple of weeks, it was back unrecognizable from the restorer, polished with a fine pastel-striped tapestry. In the afternoon, when my son returned home, he saw it in the middle of the living room and gasped, exclaiming, "Good job, Mom! I hope you will inherit it over the years." On another occasion, we found an elegant Gregorian-style bookcase with curved and beveled glass doors. Over time, I learned that it was a very difficult piece to obtain and priced by antique dealers. It sat intact on the curb of a house that had been inhabited by some gringos who had moved in. Apparently, the movers had forgotten. I never knew whether to pick it up for them later or for me. When we got home, Jim helped us get it inside and was very surprised with our acquisition. He even offered to give it a little refreshment, as it didn't need much more than that. I was happy, as he had inherited the woodworking habit from his grandfather and father. I remember that in the afternoons, when he returned from the airline, he would go straight to the garage and with great dedication polish every nook and cranny under the furniture. He went on for several weeks. Every day I went to see the progress and told him it was ready. But he, with his perfectionism, said, "No, not yet. It must be smooth as velvet and the grain shiny." After 1,000 hours of work, one afternoon, when I returned from the office, he had it for me as a surprise in the living room, next to my elegant armchair. I ran to decorate it with books, and on the cover of the desk I placed a silver letter opener next to some small glasses of flexible metal, which had belonged to his grandfather. I sat down to contemplate my first antiques, without knowing that this initiative, over the years, would turn me into an antique dealer. Needless to say, every time someone visited us, they would make a comment about my 2 pieces of jewelry, asking me about their origin. I, undeterred, began to tell them that my husband's grandfather had brought the secretaire from Europe at the end of the war in 1945. And at the mention of his name, they would ask me, "The general?" "Yes," I would say. When my husband and children heard this answer, they would slowly disappear one after the other in embarrassment, while I continued to entertain my guests with his fables, just as Tom did. Years later, I realized that being a foreigner, with my Chilean accent, very different from the Spanish spoken in the Korea, gave me an advantage, because wherever I went and opened my mouth, I made friends, whether at the grocery store, the doctor, or the hairdresser. It's very much my thing. I like to share with people and learn about their lives, who are often on the same frequency as me and just want to talk. So when it was time for me to become the owner of my antique shop, I was ready to attend my clients, with whom I would spend hours chatting about trivialities. But the most important thing is that they always live with some item, which they fell in love with through my stories. Chapter 30. Maggie's Antique Shop. In the late 80s, life went on for everyone with their respective routines. I spent my time busy raising the children, taking them to and from school and sports activities. In addition to working full-time in Bernardo's office, when I returned at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, I continued with the housework. Meanwhile, Jim became a frequent traveler from airport to airport, accompanying Mr. Riquet, Vice President of American Airlines, who became his mentor and friend, promoting tourism on the island. The two of them traveled the world together, spreading the word about the incomparable beauty of the Caribbean. Years later, I would learn that he not only traveled with Mr. Riquet, but also with some secretaries and officials of the airline industry, as they called it. Although I spent most of my time alone, I took advantage of the benefit of Jim's job to send my children to summer camps in different states of the Union, wanting to broaden their world. As the years passed, they grew into teenagers, while I turned 40, tired and burdened with my obligations. I no longer saw good prospects for myself in Bernardo's company, as he did not consider me indispensable. I had no idea where I would look for a job with the little academic preparation I had, since in those years the boom of computers and electronic advances began, where young people performed very efficiently. Because of that and other things, after 5 years with Bernardo, I decided it was time to retire. However, during all the time, I was learning from my brother's skills in running a business, to the point where I excelled in selling his equipment over the phone. I also learned bookkeeping, checkbook keeping, inventory, purchasing and sales, negotiation techniques, organizing paperwork, etc. On the other hand, his company had grown too large and presented other needs that were broader and more specific. It was my time to fly. So I left his company, not knowing what I would do with my life. I was bitter and disappointed for several days, but as every crisis can be an opportunity, I got back on my feet with Jim's support, who motivated me to set up an antique shop. With some fear of failure, I agreed to start my new project for which Jim rented and remodeled a house. I named it Maggie's Hutton's Antique. To stock up on some items, we decided to travel to California, where my son, who had told me about the great warehouses selling antiques, was studying. I also received some pieces on consignment from my sister, as she had previously started a business in this area. From the first day I opened my store, my life was turned upside down. It was a resounding success. I entered a world I could never have known, losing my fear of failure and beginning to trust my talent and decisions. Finally, living my brother's company turned out to be a blessing, and I am grateful for that stage that gave me the skills to effectively manage my own business, Los Andes Inc., which I ran smoothly for 20 years, becoming a prestigious antique dealer. By 1987, I had managed to save some money and traveled to Chile to buy my first home in order to have a place to stay when I visited my parents. Chapter 31. Holes in the Spiderweb. One morning when I was opening the gate to go to work, I saw two men behind the gate and they asked me questions. "Does Mr. James Hutton live here?" "Yes. What do you want?" I asked. "Talk to him," one of the individuals replied. "What for?" "It is for a lawsuit." "Lawsuit?" I said, raising my voice. "Yes," he answered again. "What's the demand?" I asked again, as I was not out of my astonishment, and the man surprised me even more when he answered, "Alimony." "Impossible," I replied. "He is my husband and we only have 2 children. There must be a mistake." "No," insisted the guy who was calling the shots. "The document says Jim Hutton." "It must be because of Brian," I said, involving my brother-in-law who was single and had a girlfriend. But the man, with document in hand, mentioned my husband's name again. I approached him and said, "What is the plaintiff's name?" And he answered me with the full name of a secretary who worked in the tourism industry, when my blameless husband was traveling with Rieger doing hard overtime. I was speechless and breathless until I quickly connected things to an affair. I walked into the house and Jim was standing there, white as snow, petrified, listening to my dialogue with the men. I just watched him and said, "You've got some nerve," and I turned around to head back to my store. At 5 o'clock in the afternoon, when I returned home, I told my 17-year-old daughter what happened in the morning, and she, so mature and understand me, answered me, "Mommy, that's your problem. I love you both." At that moment, her father was coming back from the office, and I approached him asking for an explanation as it was supposed to be done in such cases. He said to me, "I've lived 10 years with this anguish and weight. You can't imagine how many times I tried to tell you, and I couldn't," he confessed with moist eyes. And taking a deep breath, he added, "Now that you have found out, I feel at peace. It was just one-time thing, I promise." "Yes, that's right. Once is enough," I answered sarcastically. "But first thing tomorrow morning, I'll call my lawyer about the divorce. I suppose that if we do it by mutual agreement, there won't be any problems. After all, there are no assets to divide. You have your accounts, I have mine, as we have lived since we got married." It was the first time I had ever set foot in a courtroom. When the magistrate called us, he asked me if I wanted to make any special request, such as a temporary or lifetime alimony, for my support. I very proudly answered, "No, Your Honor. I am self-sufficient. Child support will be sufficient." The judge looked at me carefully and asked him, "Are you sure?" "Yes, Your Honor." Then, there being no request from both parties, we terminate the civil union. We stamped our signatures on a document, and everything ended with the same haste with which it had united 18 years before, but only on paper, because in practice our life continued the same. Apparently, there must have been some affection, since we continued to live under the same roof and sleep in the same bed. The papers made no difference in our lives. In time, I met Ariadna, my children's half-sister, who was raised by her mother, never interfering in our lives. 30 years later, I find that I have been so compensated by the universe that I feel a little sorry for how far away she grew up from her father. As I write these lines, she is already a married woman and the mother of 2 beautiful children, Jim's grandchildren. At that moment I decided, with all more reason, to assert myself with my projects, because you never know what might happen. Over time I expanded my knowledge of the antiques business. I had the opportunity to attend different antique shows outside the island and personally appreciate the deposits of pieces from past centuries, made of fine woods, with carvings, veneers, metal inlays, ivories, and leathers. I learned about styles, to recognize periods and to define them in circa, approximate dates. I also had the good fortune to negotiate valuable crystals, porcelains, bronze, silverware, items highly sought after by customers who visit antique dealers. Day by day, I fell in love with my work until I became addicted to it. The more I bought and sold, the more passionate I became about it. On the other hand, I formed such a special bond with each of my clients that it was a pleasure to serve them with care. Many times, by telling them about the origin of the furniture and accessories, I gave rise to extensive conversations, moving from one topic to another. This is how I made great friends who visited me periodically. For this reason, I carried them in the deepest part of my heart. Impossible to forget when they would arrive with their decorators and tell me, "We are looking for something for the second home." And they would take half the store with them, while I didn't know whether to cry or laugh with joy and gratitude. Sometimes I joked and told them, "Thanks to you, I already have my second home in Chile, where I hope to receive you someday to show you my homeland." How could I not mention my great friend Bonnie, who worked as a film and television commercial producer? She, in that field, was a leader in Puerto Rico and rented me everything there was available for this filming set, returning the merchandise to me a few days later with a juicy check. Sometimes, anecdotal happened to me on one occasion when she visited me when an American woman from Metro Golden Mayer. On my desk, there was a portrait of Tom that had resemblance of the celebrity leading men of the 1940s. The American picked it up and put it on the list. I laughed, telling her, "He's my dad." And she answered me, "Terrific, Maggie. Now he'll be on the big screen. He's the guy we're looking for with the resemblance to the character." And I begged, "Please don't lose it." "Don't worry," she replied. "It will come back. I promise." Over the years, I acquired a name for my constant professionalism, always ready to provide a good service, whether in the sale, delivery, warranty, or restoration of any item, earning the trust of my clientele, who requested my assistance in some appraisal of their furniture, the same that they gave me on consignment for me to negotiate. I also had the cooperation of Jim, who accompanied me when I went shopping. He was in charge of getting me the suppliers and the personnel to load the container, as well as making the shipping arrangements. We really made a great team. By the end of 1998, Jim had left the airline and his trips with his friend Enrique. He now traveled with Bernardo. They had teamed up to import lumber and railroad ties for the sugar mills, and also to manufacture kitchen cabinets, doors, and windows. On one of these trips, he met a wealthy Brazilian lumber dealer named Plínio, who invited him to visit his sawmills in Curitiba, Brazil, near Iguazu. He was interested in showing him his company so that they could do business and represent him in the Caribbean. Don Plínio was an excellent person who provided him with all kinds of export facilities and with whom he maintained a business relationship for several years. However, Jim partnered with Bernardo as a reinforcement in this business, and in the end, it was my brother who capitalized better on the opportunity, expanding his wealth. Jim, once again, did not do so well, but he did a lot of sightseeing, and I imagine he enjoyed the wonderful city and perhaps a few garotas on the beach of Copacabana. In spite of the treachery, or maybe because of it, Jim always gave me a hand when I needed it, since his office was at my place and his work was without fixed hours. This consisted of representations of European American lines of automated systems for the manufacturing industry, mostly pharmaceuticals. His equipment sold easily, as it was of international quality and prestige. On the other hand, he gave consultancy to the purchasing engineers about the whole operation, tightening his commercial ties. Although my sentimental spider's web received a stone that made an irreparable hole, the empowerment that my story gave me a rope to hold on to so as not to fall. That time has passed since my husband's sleep until I found out, made me weigh my decision more coldly, and finally, the unconditional support he always gave to my undertakings had greater weight, allowing me to enjoy great stability.